Hey listeners, Harrison here. Just wanted to put a quick content warning ahead of the episode. Jon and I's discussion of Transatlanticism ends up covering a lot of sexual content and drug references. Wanted to make sure you knew up front before carrying on. If you keep listening, I hope you enjoy it.
Greetings and welcome to Play Disc, the musical podcast in which my brother and I take deep dives into full albums of pop and rock music. I am Jon Porrabill.
And I'm Harrison Porrabill.
And what a month we have had. Harrison, are you still confined to quarters for the moment?
Yeah. Still confined to quarters. I basically leave the house once a week to get groceries, and that's it.
Yeah. All right. Stay home, everybody. This sucks, but stay home.
But my freedom.
Uh-huh.
Stay home, everyone.
Stay at home, everybody. Stay at home, everyone. All we can do right now is stay home and listen to music and record our podcasts. You know, Harrison and I have always done this show remotely because we are not located in the same city. Apparently, this is a novel idea for a lot of people. I started listening to a new podcast just this past week where the people running it said, we had always wanted to do this podcast together, but then this quarantine happened, but the good people at insert name of podcast host here found a way to make it work. And I was like, this is not magic. You just get on a conference call and record, right?
Right.
It's not like you find a way to make it work.
I saw a tweet recently that was like, you want to know how bad things have gotten? Amazon is out of microphones.
Oh, man. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe we've been on hard mode the whole time.
Yeah.
Today, we have a very special album about keeping social distance.
Or antisocial distance, as it might be.
Broken antisocial scene?
Ugh.
No. Okay. Today's album was requested by our second ever interview guest, Patty Lynn of The Wind and the Wave. And we rolled the dice last episode, and her number came up. So today we are discussing Transatlanticism, the 2003 album by Death Cab for Cutie, their fourth. It was their last album before they sold out to a major label.
Sorry, Harrison from episode 1 is twitching right now. But yeah, it was kind of weird. My sort of relation.
Sorry, one other thing here. Before they sold out, joined a major label, this was released October 2003 on Barsuk Records. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not going to retake it.
Cool. It's kind of weird that you mentioned the quote-unquote selling out thing, because my sort of way to get into Death Cab for Cutie was for all the wrong reasons.
Oh?
Well, so I remember back in, I guess it was about 2003 or like very early 2004, you introduced me to Modest Mouse through Float On right before Float On had charted.
Okay.
So, you know, not to imply that you were like into Modest Mouse before they were cool or anything, but like...
Yeah, I was definitely not ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah,
Float
well,
On was
you were
like
Modest
Mouse
a
song.
day ahead of the curve. You were 15 minutes ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I mean, Float On was my first Modest Mouse song, but I'm only cool because I heard it before it charted.
Yeah, and you showed it to me, and I thought it was really cool, like being in on the secret before everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, I was like 13 years old. And I found out that Modest Mouse, like, one, they weren't new. You know, Good News for People Who Love Bad News was like their 5th or 6th album. And that they had this like whole body of work, and that in certain circles they were actually very popular and very well known. And, you know, I could find out about that. And I became kind of obsessed with like, who's the next Modest Mouse?
Oh, yeah, all us music geeks were just chasing that high.
Right, like...
of being ahead of the next discovery.
Yeah. Like I said, all the wrong reasons. And, you know, like, who's that next indie darling? Who's that next college radio sweetheart that has an existing body of work that I can be snobbish about before they get big? And all signs pointed towards Death Cab for Cutie.
Nobody in the pool had Maroon 5, right?
Oh, Jesus.
But yeah, Death Cab for Cutie, they had a lot of buzz in the early aughts. They definitely did.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I kind of like forced myself to get into them because, you know, that's what like the real adult music critics are into. Adult here being code for college aged.
Oh yeah, I was so adult back then.
And yeah, I never really liked them, but I listened to them a lot because trying to like force myself to like them. Kind of like what I was alleging Kanye probably does for King Crimson, but much less successfully.
So you kind of went through the motions but never really got into it?
Yeah.
And was it this album? Was it Transatlanticism?
Yeah, it was largely Transatlanticism, but I'm going to be honest, I don't remember much of it at all.
Okay.
I didn't really start like actually enjoying Death Cab and like listening to them in earnest until around like in the immediate aftermath of Katrina.
Oh, okay.
Because I had an MP3 player loaded with a bunch of stuff, and we'd be in the car a lot because, you know, a lot of traveling back and forth from New Orleans to Baton Rouge to Florida, and you know, Death Cab for Cutie just kind of hits differently, you know, in the immediate aftermath of tragedy.
In the immediate aftermath, their next full album, Plans, actually came out during Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, and
August 30th, 2005.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I do remember listening to Plans a lot.
Plans was my first Death Cab for Cutie album as well. You know, I had heard all the buzz about them, probably starting when I was in high school. But, you know, I went to a small liberal arts college in the mid-aughts, so, like, yeah, Death Cab for Cutie is like the lingua franca among young liberal arts students in that era. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you can't go without knowing a little bit about Death Cab. I have to admit, I think maybe one of the reasons I never gave them a shot before then was their name. It's a pretty dumb name. But
I mean, look, the big acts in my day were Death Cab for Cutie, My Chemical Romance, Modest Mouse, Franz Ferdinand. Like, I don't think Death Cab for Cutie's that dumb.
I guess.
Fall Out Boy.
Well, Fall Out Boy was a Simpsons reference. Those are always cool.
Yeah, okay.
Did you hear? Simpsons references are back in Pog form.
Your Millhouse is pretty good.
Look at me. What would give you the impression that I don't have a good Millhouse impression?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I had heard them. I'd heard their name, so they were like one of those bands that everybody was talking about, but I had never gotten around to. And then I saw that they had a new album in 2005, and I was like, I've heard a lot about this band. I should probably listen to this album. So I checked it out. I liked it. That's the one that has I Will Follow You Into the Dark on it, which is their most, their most well-known and beloved song. It also has a few other songs that I really enjoyed. Crooked Teeth is one that probably my favorite from that album. I never did feel compelled to go back and listen to their prior work until their number came up 2 weeks ago when we rolled the dice.
Right.
So here we are. We're listening to Transatlanticism at the request of Patty Lynn from The Wind and the Wave. Mm-hmm. What are your major impressions of this, Harrison?
I like it. Or I think I do, but I can't really... It kind of runs right through me. It's a very ethereal experience. Because, like, I listen to it, and there are definitely lines in individual songs that, like, jump out at me like, yeah, no, I really feel that. But, like, as soon as I divorce it from any kind of context, it's like, oh, that's sort of weird and silly. And the production by Chris Walla is very... It does a really good job of keeping my attention, but, like, as soon as the music stops, it's just kind of gone.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about two main people here. So, listeners, if you need to take notes or anything, the singer and principal songwriter for the band is Ben Gibbard, and the guitarist, keyboardist, and producer is Chris Walla. So we're going to be talking about those two guys a lot. The other two musicians involved on here, Nick Harmer, who did bass, and Jason McGarr, who played the drums. They were there. We are not going to be talking extensively about what they did or what their role is in the band or this album in particular.
Yeah, it was
So,
just at some point when I was listening to the album, I definitely realized that like, wow, whoever's doing the production on this album, I think is like actually the thing helping them stand out.
oh, I
Um,
agree wholeheartedly.
like I don't even mean to diss Gibbard in any way, shape, or form, but like I feel like without Walla, I feel like their work would sound much more generic than it does, and perhaps probably should, maybe.
So about 5 years ago, Death Cab for Cutie came out with a new album that I had been really interested to hear, and it really left me kind of flat. I found out after the fact that that album had been their first without Chris Walla. And I was like,
Ah.
oh, well, that explains it. So, your theory has been tested and, at least in my opinion, proven correct.
Yeah, and I was actually shocked when I found out the producer was like an actual band member, because that's not that common.
Yeah, I guess not. I don't know.
But yeah, I was actually somewhat impressed with myself that I kind of like spotted the production as a thing that was particularly unique and realized, oh yeah, no, it's not just some studio producer, it's someone who is very intimately a part of the album's creation.
Reportedly, there had been some tensions within the band after their last album because they had felt rushed and felt a lot of pressure to perform in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And that pressure to perform led them to say things like, this has never happened before, really. As a result of the tension in those previous sessions, they booked a lot of studio time and recorded this album over a longer period of time, doing day-long sessions over the course of about a month. So reportedly that freedom gave them the opportunity to really become more familiar with the songs and give them the treatment that they deserved in terms of, layering additional musical instruments and production flourishes and things like that, which I think contributes to the signature sound here.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it.
So that said,
Mm-hmm.
I want to make it clear I don't have anything against Death Cab for Cutie or Ben Gibbard or Chris Walla or anybody involved here. Like I said, I really liked Death Cab's other albums. I liked Plans. I liked Codes and Signals. I liked the Ben Gibbard album immediately preceding this one, which was The Postal Service with Danny Tamborello.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I liked Transatlanticism. I'm still sitting with it. I'm still processing it.
Oh.
And you can't see me, but I'm like cradling my chin in my hands, like I'm still thinking on it. And I think a lot of it has to do with Ben Gibbard's lyrics,
I mean, I'll definitely admit I do not take them as a whole.
right?
Bits that I really like just kind of jump out at me, and the rest just kind of flows right through me.
Uh-huh.
Which, not that I'm an expert or anything, but definitely feels like the optimal way to listen to Ben Gibbard's lyrics.
I guess so.
So I feel like you're digging a little bit too deep, but this is music criticism, so.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, like, listen, these songs they're all based on interesting ideas,
Right.
and they all have like a unique angle to them. But I just think line to line, there's a lot of clunkiness in the lyrics that took me out of the songs. Almost every song I have at least one example.
Of like an overwritten line.
Yeah, of an overwritten line or a phrase that strikes me wrong. Track 2, Lightness, is based around this hook about ivory lines, which just seems like purple prose to me because, he's talking about highway lines, right? That was my read on it. The
Yeah.
lines on the road.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a couple things.
Okay.
I don't know. Anytime I hear white lines, my mind goes to one place. Which, that's just kind of a thing my mind does because, rock music and, yeah.
Okay.
I don't mean to make any specific accusations about Ben Gibbard's recreational lifestyle or anything like that. But yeah, just anytime I hear white lines, that's kind of where my mind goes to immediately.
It's not just there, though. There's the New Year has this line in the bridge. I wish the world was flat like in the old days and I could travel just by folding a map. And
See, that one definitely jumps out at me, but I always just kind of like, just roll with it.
I mean, credit where it's due. It's a unique image, but I think the metaphor is a little bit mixed, right?
Like I said, it definitely, that one, this is one I'll agree with you, it definitely pulls me out of the song, But like I try to think about it for maybe 5 seconds and go, screw it.
Right.
It's more of a feeling than a place.
I mean, I'm just pointing at those examples. I mean, there are instances of this that kind of dot the whole album, and I don't want to fault him because like these are creative songs. They're creative angles for a song, but I think there's something failing in the execution, and the production is doing its damnedest to try and save it, and that's really where the interesting thing comes in.
Right. Also, I just kind of want to interject here. I find it amazing that this is a favorite of Patty Lynn, because I remember during our interview, we talked a lot about music production because her bandmate did most of the production for, what, their first 2 albums? Or was it just
he
the
was
first?
the producer of their first and third albums.
That's what it was. Okay.
But he also, he like arranges the songs. He builds them. He talks about building the track, not just writing it.
And, you know, based on how much the production on this album stands out, it makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Because I was actually kind of surprised. I can't really explain why, but when Patty Lynn suggested Death Cab for Cutie, I was like, oh, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? But like now that I've like listened to the album and gotten a real feel for it, the emphasis of the production and the way Patty talked about her and Dwight's approach to arrangement and production, it clicks. Because like when you pull out individual lyrics and kind of point out how like they feel like they're not building up properly or they're taking you out of the song, it definitely feels like the production and the songwriting add up to more than the sum of their parts, at least for me.
I can't argue that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's alchemy at work here as these elements combine.
And there's also just kind of a general trend in criticism of Death Cab for Cutie that I don't know that I necessarily want to push back against, but that I don't want to fall into myself, of like unbelievably smug pretension.
This is a fairly pretentious album.
Yeah, but like, Jesus, the criticism of Death Cab for Cutie, especially in the mid-aughts, was like unbearably smug. Pitchfork at their most pitchforkiest.
Yeah, doing research for this, I found a Pitchfork review that is actually kind of a parody of itself, because the critic wrote an outline of a review and turned it in for publication intentionally unfinished. And it was a middling review. It was like a 6.4, and then 10 years later they're reviewing this album for the 10th anniversary edition, and they called it Death Cab for Cutie's most enduring and best album or something like that, and gave it an 8.4.
Transatlanticism?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against the album, but I would definitely say that title belongs to Plans.
It's Pitchfork, man. What are you going to do?
Fair enough. There was this like reaction, I guess, to like the selling out. I don't really know.
I don't know either.
I hope you can hear the air quotes around selling out.
Right. It's worth mentioning that this was the immediate follow-up to the Postal Service Give Up, which was like a breakthrough album for Ben Gibbard. Because that album was much more successful than anything Death Cab had done to date.
Okay, I was actually surprised when I found that out, because Postal Service doesn't enter my consciousness until the UPS ad campaign in like, what, 2007, 2008?
Sure.
Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I remember hearing
Such Great
Heights in a UPS ad. And I remember that was hilarious because one of the conditions of them being allowed to use the Postal Service as their band name was that they licensed their material to the Postal Service.
Right.
But anyway.
That was the first time I remember hearing about them, and I just kind of thought that, like, yeah, Postal Service is like from around, 2006, 2007, 2008, something like that. And that their album came out in 2003. I was like, wait, what? So, yeah.
Another aspect of Transatlanticism worth discussing is that it's reportedly a concept album. Harrison, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 meaning strongly disagree and 5 meaning strongly agree, how would you rate the statement that this album is a concept album?
2.4.
Yikes. So just barely. Okay, I see what you're getting at.
Yeah, like I am mostly neutral on it, but just the slightest waft of a breeze in the direction of disagree. Because, like, I get it, but everything on the album is so ephemeral and very, like, not solid that to say that there's a concept or a very specific grounded theme, that just doesn't land for me at all. Like, the album's about loneliness and separation and isolation and self-hatred, but, like, is there enough there to call that a concept?
What even is a concept album?
Right, there's that too, because, like, what's the difference between a concept album and a rock opera? And is an album with a theme the same thing as an album with a concept? And, like, obviously it's a continuum, but...
I think most good albums tend to have some kind of running theme or through line.
I'd hope.
But I think there's a lot... I don't know.
That's what we do here.
Exactly. So the question is, at what point does that become prominent enough to mark it as a concept album? And is there a narrative here? I did notice, before reading that this is a concept album, I did notice these songs sort of being in conversation with each other, as Dan Byrne put it.
Right.
For instance, the ivory lines, which I think are street, highway markers in Lightness, lead directly into title and registration, where he's musing about his glove box, presumably because he's been pulled over?
So that doesn't actually come up in the song.
Right, but when else do you need title and registration?
Yeah. The album does seem to be very much concerned with travel and transit.
Travel, transit, and separation. It's supposed to be about a long-distance relationship.
Huh.
Hence Transatlanticism.
Right.
Going across the... Anyway. So, we also have things like The Sound of Settling, which is, this upbeat song about settling, about not being with the one you love, so loving the one you're with. Wait a minute, that's a different song.
It's weird, because I definitely, like, the vibe of that song is very... almost mean-spirited when you think about it. But
it's very mean-spirited. A lot of this album is very mean-spirited.
But there's also, like, that kind of almost, like, blissful release of, like, thank God, I don't have to worry about this anymore.
I guess.
I have made my decision. I'm living with it. I'm going to be happy about that.
But then it leads right into Tiny Vessels, which is a song about not being happy with it at all.
Yeah.
A song in which he... basically admits, this is tawdry and cheap and I'm using you. And I'm going to feel bad about it, but it's not going to stop me from doing it.
Yeah. So are we going to talk about how the character that Gibbard plays is not a nice person?
I think you have to have a meaningful discussion on this album. I think it's a requirement, yes.
I feel like he's what in our modern parlance one might call a prepare for a naughty word. A fuckboy.
Ooh, I was going to say a quote-unquote nice guy.
Sure.
But yeah, what you said works too.
And there's also this sense throughout the album that, like, Gibbard wasn't that old when he was writing this. There's a part of me that's like, so... Gibbard is writing from the perspective of a character. That's fine. That's a thing that happens a lot. And the character is obviously very unaware of how much of a, like, just worthless piece of crap they are.
I mean, it's a matter of some debate, the extent to which this is autobiographical.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Which, hey, we all do messed up stuff in our 20s. Well, I hope we do. Otherwise, I'm going to feel a lot worse. And perhaps... the man writing this character understands that now. But there is kind of a romantic quality to the way he writes this perspective that makes me think he knows that it's bad, but doesn't necessarily understand that it's bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's learned to say he disagrees with it, but that he doesn't necessarily feel that way.
So, yeah, there's definitely an element of this character being morally conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of romanticizing the moral repugnance of his actions.
Yeah.
And the
Like
sort of feelings of self-loathing and...
It falls very much into that, like, Weezer territory of, like, you are probably in on the joke. Probably. I hope. But are your listeners? And do
Right.
you care?
Yeah.
Presumably you care, but...
Yeah. Play disc!
I f***ing Love This Record is a music podcast hosted by me, the Derek Care of You. Every week, a guest and I discuss a record that we both f***ing love. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts or from our website, lovethisrecord.com.
Play disc! So let's talk about some specific songs.
Well, I think we should start at the end, personally.
Yeah, that's something we haven't done on this show. Let's begin at the end. Track 11, closing track, A Lack of Color.
Yeah.
I have a very simple note in my notes on this song.
Uh-huh.
Which is, it was a strange decision to end the album on a ballad about being emotionally unavailable, masturbating to porn, and then drunk dialing his ex.
I mean, it's a pretty honest reflection of the listener, I guess, of the presumed listener. It's
Freudian slip there, huh?
End of Evangelion for music nerds.
I suppose. The other thing I thought was really notable about this as an ending,
was to be clear for anyone who doesn't get the reference. End of Evangelion literally starts, like, the opening moments are the main character, the audience insert character, masturbating over the comatose body of his crush, girlfriend, to completion.
Now I know what the ivory lines are.
Probably?
That joke is too dirty to leave in, but I'm very proud of it. Okay,
Yeah, that's definitely a choice. The thing for me that really gets me about that song is Gibbard repeats the line, "This is fact, not fiction," for the first time in years.
All the girls in every girly magazine can't make me feel.
And I kind of obsess over this line in like a Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia at the Conspiracy Board way. Because, like, is that Gibbard being honest? Is that him dropping the character and speaking as himself? Or is that the character coming to terms with himself and being honest for once in his life? Is it both? Is it neither? What does "is" mean?
that depends on what the meaning of the word is.
Join us next episode as we discuss how meaning is constructed.
So, the other thing that really struck me about A Lack of Color is how the messaging of the lyrics conflicts, I think intentionally, with the music. The music, sonically, it's an ending. It's mellow, it's down-tempo, it's more of a ballad. The guitars, we've switched from those overdriven guitars to acoustic. It's major key. It feels like a resolution until you pay attention to the lyrics and realize that it's still very unresolved. The narrator is as messed up as he's ever been. He's apparently learned nothing.
Yeah.
And this is not the only time on this album where I've noticed a mismatch between the mood of the music and the mood of the lyrics.
So what you're saying is that it lacks a climax?
I'm saying we're waiting for something that doesn't come. There are other songs that do this. If we step backward by one, We Look Like Giants does this too. It's like a nostalgia piece. It's like a Funhouse Mirror version of Summer of '69, where he's recounting this tumultuous romance in his early life. I think it's implied by the lyrics that he's lost his virginity in We Look Like Giants. But he's not happy about it. He's not wistful in his recounting. He's just dripping with regret and self-loathing.
I mean,
He's really angry about this time.
When every Thursday I'd brave those mountain passes, and you'd skip your early classes, and we'd learn how our bodies work.
I mean, without going into too much explicit detail or anything, you know, there's definitely a culture of, like, really valuing the symbolic importance of losing your virginity, but also, at least among young men in certain parts of the United States, of, like, rushing to lose it as soon as possible, which creates a kind of conflicting motivation that oftentimes leads to really unsatisfying encounters.
Fair enough.
Just like, I'm not saying that this is a good feeling being evoked by the song, but definitely feels real in a very unpleasant way.
Another thing that's interesting about We Look Like Giants is that the rhymes are much looser than the rest of the album. Several lines just don't rhyme at all, and the ones that do, they're kind of loose slant rhymes. Assuming it was intentional, I thought that was an interesting way to signify the lack of compatibility in this relationship.
Yeah, I also noticed that and agree with you 100%. That is a valid observation that I was also clever enough to notice.
Yep, you had that in your notes.
Yep. Just
there
right here.
Right there where it says, what Jon said.
Yeah. The main thing on this song that I kept thinking about is I kept thinking about our Too Much Joy episode.
Oh yeah.
on serial killers, because like eventually I realized that We Looked Like Giants was, you know, about young love and that sort of invincibility that comes with that in a way. And I kept thinking of my key track. I didn't really have a key track for that episode, but the line, "I am the smallest giant ever." And, you know, I don't think this is like an intentional reference or homage or anything. You know, Death Cab for Cutie and Too Much Joy are on very opposite ends of the spectrum. But I kept thinking about that because I thought that was kind of cool that these two bands both came up on the imagery of giant for the sort of passion of young romance. Or, well, infatuation more so than romance.
The two are often conflated. I thought it was a great image. You know who else thought this was a great image? Was Robert Christgau.
Oh, he liked this album?
For Village Voice? No, he didn't like this album. He liked this one song.
Really?
He indicated that this one song was a notable track on an otherwise skippable album.
Wow. I'm not as surprised that he wasn't a fan of this as I have been in the past, but, oh well.
Yeah. Other noteworthy
I wonder
moments
if
here.
Robert Christgau has at least one daughter.
Interesting question to ask, and I don't know the answer. Any other noteworthy moments on the album to you, Harrison?
Nothing all that explicit. Honestly, a lot of the stuff I want to point out, I want to point out because of the way it makes me think of other things. Expo 86, just because of the way it's framed, really reminds me of Anna Ing. They Might Be Giants.
All alone at the 64 World's Fair. $80.
I mean, it's about being at a World's Fair and finding love, or a unique connection, maybe, if not necessarily love. I don't fully know what Anna Ing is about, if I'm going to be honest.
I am professionally obligated to point out that Expo 86 does begin on an extended allusion to a Beatles song.
Ah!
Oh, yeah. Compare with Helter Skelter. When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide where I stop and I turn and I go for a ride till I get to the bottom and I see you again.
Yeah, I guess. That does sound like a pretty intentional homage. More so than my Anna Ing or my Too Much Joy observation.
Yeah, when I saw these side by side, I realized there's no way that was an accident.
Right.
And it's a similar thing. It's the comparison of a slide, a literal like playground slide, with a whirlwind romance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it seems that I don't have the skills to recollect the twists and turns of plot that turned us from lovers to friends. I'm thinking I should take that volume back up off the shelf.
And I know I've been using the words romance and romantic rather liberally in our discussion of this album, and you have to understand that it's kind of for want of a better word, because as Harrison pointed out, this is not storybook stuff here. The emotions involved are kind of ugly and unpleasant, but, you know, we're talking about a love connection or a sexual attraction of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
I also really just love that guitar lick, the slides, the ding ding in Expo 86.
Right. But yeah, that's kind of all I specifically had. I was genuinely shocked when I saw that Transatlanticism was 8 minutes long, because it doesn't feel like it at all to me.
Oh, yeah, I really like Transatlanticism.
I don't know that I like
title
it,
track.
but I am not offended by its length. It does not stick out to me as like, this is a problem, I wish this song was over. It's just, I thought it was like on the 3 to 4 minute range with everything else on the album, and it's not.
There's a song on one of my favorite albums that memorably did this to me, that once I looked at it and saw that it was over 7 minutes long, I thought, what? How is that possible? And it was actually an album that Transatlanticism reminds me of in a lot of places. The album is Left and Leaving by the Weaker Thans.
I was going to guess that it was Hurricane, because Bob Dylan, but soon as...
No, I got to admit, I love Hurricane, but I feel its length. That is a long song, and it feels like a long song. Not a bad song, but... Anyway.
But yeah, the Weaker Thans, huh?
The Weaker Thans, Left and Leaving. I love that album, and just every once in a while, it's not like an overall this album feels like that album, but every once in a while, one guitar lick would hit me in a way, and I just suddenly think, whoa, that sounds like the Weaker Thans. So yeah, I mean, that slide guitar lick that Expo 86 is built around is really nice. It does have more of that clunky lyricism, but if I move my place in line, I'll lose, and I have waited, the anticipation's got me glued. I guess that's just part of what you got to take with this album.
Hey, dude, sometimes his lines just hit perfectly.
Yeah, for instance, the squeaking of our skin against the steel has gotten worse. That line is great. That one feels like a shoe, you know? It's just whoop. But what else? Do we want to talk about the singles, by the way? There were 3 singles from this album.
I couldn't even tell you what any of them were. Like, I can't guess. My only guess would be Transatlanticism, but there's no way in hell they released an 8-minute single.
Nope. The New Year, which we, in spite of it being the album opener, we haven't actually really talked about yet on this episode.
Okay.
And then The Sound of Settling, which is the shortest and probably least representative song on this entire album. And then Title and Registration.
I mean, I don't know how you pick the singles for this album. I can't really critique those choices, except maybe New Year. New Year's just kind of,
Well, it's the opener, and it's a real salvo. It's a real, like, it's almost U2-ish.
Explosions off in the distance. In the distance.
You know, the guitars are massive in that song, and it's one of the more up-tempo
really
songs on the album as well.
But it's
Well,
really
sure, they all are.
Yeah, but even that one especially, because that one seems like a much more universal kind of bitterness. It's not, oh, I cheated on my girlfriend in this very specific way, I'm a piece of crap. It's, I didn't keep any of my resolutions again. I'm the worst. Which, like,
Yeah.
That's a lot more relatable than most of the other crimes on this album.
I suppose. And speaking of, you know, cheating on your girlfriend, I had kind of conflicting lyrical interpretations of Tiny Vessels. Can we talk about that one for a second?
I mean, so obviously the lyrics don't, like, actually say this in any way, shape, or form, but I can't help but interpret Tiny Vessels, like, Literally? Tiny.
Literally how?
Tiny, minuscule, microscopic seminal vessels.
So, like, little homunculi.
Hey, look, whatever you call your dudes, that works for me, man. Because, like, tiny vessels is kind of... It's about the act. It's about the transgression. It's about the affair, the tryst. And...
So there's definitely an affair taking place in this song. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I was not 100% clear on that. It was definitely the first place my mind looked, and then I read the lyrics a little closer, and I thought, but is it? Now, Gibbard's doing something interesting here with Tiny Vessels, because he's changing the point of view of the song multiple times to keep us on our toes.
Right.
Right? So it starts on... it starts with second person, but that second person is, where he's saying, you're lying with her, like he's talking to himself. And then he transitions into the first and third person. She is beautiful, but she doesn't mean a thing to me. And then back for the third verse, he's back in the second person, talking not to himself, but to his lover, saying, you're beautiful, but you don't mean a thing to me. And it's not clear to me whether that lover is the same as the she in the second verse or not. And it kind of changes the emotional context of the song.
I think it's kind of the way you lie to yourself.
There was a girl with light brown streaks, and she was beautiful, but she didn't mean a thing to me.
I mean, either way, it's emotionally bad, right? Either way, it's a callousness and a dirtiness.
Well, it
that's
feels like...
underlying the heart of the song.
Well, it feels like when he says, but she don't mean a thing to me, that's... throughout the song, he's not sure which she he's referring to.
I suppose. So the question for me
Like,
is
that's the way you kind of lie to yourself through infidelity, where like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm cheating on my partner with this person, but this person I'm cheating with, they don't mean a thing to me. But then as you continue it on, it's the one you're cheating on that doesn't mean a thing to you. And you, like, have to keep recontextualizing your actions, or just, admit that you're a complete monster.
Yeah, and there doesn't need to be an infidelity for this lyric to make sense. Because he could be talking about her and then to her, and it could be the same woman in both verses.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, she doesn't mean a thing to me is, like, culturally, it's a thing we hear men use to justify infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, baby, you're the one I love. That was just physical. It didn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then he cleverly turns it on its head again and says, well, but you don't mean a thing to me. So I think I like it better with that interpretation, but it could be either. And the fact that he's kind of toying around with the point of view of the song makes it intentionally muddy in a way that's confusing and compelling and ambiguous and invites multiple interpretations. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's one of the songs I often see cited as one of the best on this album, and I get that for real.
Mm-hmm.
I'm for that.
Yeah. Also,
Okay.
It comes right after the sound of settling, where, like, he's happy, but also, this is not a recipe for stability.
To quote Tevye, they are so happy they don't know how miserable they are.
Right.
Well, on that note, seems like as good a place as any for me to ask you our time-honored question.
Yeah, I mean, right
Harrison,
after the climax, right?
as we bask in our afterglow, I must ask, what was your key track?
I struggled
The
with
key track, before you answer, I'll interrupt before you answer.
Yeah,
The
let's...
key track is a segment we have at the end of every episode where Harrison and I identify a song that we think is important to the album. It could be the best, it could be our favorite, or it could just be somehow representative of the album as a whole. It's totally arbitrary, and we don't share them with each other before we record. So we're going to surprise each other, and they might line up. What did you pick, Harrison?
My key track for this album is "I Will Follow You Into the Dark."
I'm gonna change my answer and agree with you because wow,
That's number one.
that song is so good it transcends the album it's on.
No, but in all seriousness, this one was actually kind of a struggle for me. But I do think, I swear, this could be like any other day I'd say something different.
Okay.
Like, because if you ask me what the best song on the album is, it's probably "We Looked Like Giants." But like, I don't really think that's my key track because it is so distinct. I think my key track is "The Sound of Settling."
Oh, okay. Wow.
This is the sound of settling.
I mean, look,
The one that I called the shortest and least representative on the album.
It's weird because, like, I swear to God, I didn't pick it because it's short. But I definitely, like, get that whole, like, it's very cruel and mean and ugly. But also, like, I kind of get that, like, getting it off your chest catharsis of, okay, I've made the bad decision, I don't have to worry anymore. Like, I am done with this.
Okay.
And also, The Sound of Settling is, for lack of a better term, it's actually kind of a bop.
You mean a ba-ba-ba-ba?
Yeah. But no, it's like kind of upbeat. It's kind of energetic. It's, you know, hey, I've got a new lease on life. I just did this terrible thing that I've been freaking out about for so long, and now it's off my chest.
It's the happiest, peppiest song on this album.
Yeah.
And for me, personally, it kind of disqualified it from being the key track for me because, like, it doesn't sound like anything else on this album. It's not... It doesn't give you a sense of what this album is about, to me.
I don't know. I think a dude being happy that he settled is about the clearest distillation of what this album's about.
All right, fair enough.
But yeah, that's it for me. What was your key track? I have a guess, but I'm not entirely certain.
I didn't have the... Well, just for funsies, what was your guess?
Tiny Vessels.
So, I didn't have the easiest time choosing a key track, but once I kind of figured out what angle I'm taking it from, it was pretty clear, and I'm comfortable with my decision and standing behind it. If you ask me what the best song on the album is, it probably is Tiny Vessels, or maybe We Look Like Giants. If you ask me for my favorite, it's actually Expo 86. But my key track is Title and Registration, because I think it is the best representation of what this album is, like warts and all.
There's no blame for how our love did slowly fade. And now that it's gone, it's like it wasn't there at all. And here I rest.
It's a clever idea. It's articulated kind of inelegantly. It has some interesting instrumentation. I like the build-up in it. It has this catchy coda involving the instrumental line on the percussive, I think it's a glockenspiel. Do 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 do. And the idea does really kind of worm its way into your skin. Like it's broad to the point of almost like hack stand-up comedy bit. Nobody keeps gloves in a glove compartment, but he's kind of turned it into this thing that reflects on why he's so unhappy.
And what's the deal with glove compartments?
And then later on, he did a whole bit about airline food in an 8-minute epic song.
Yeah.
But no, but for real, Title and Registration is not a perfect song. I do have my issues with it. But it is my key track because I think that would have been like,
if I was to guess your key track, that would have been like my 9th or 10th guess. And there's only 11 songs on this album.
Yeah, I mean, in spite of my quibbles, like if I wanted to take one song to give you a sense of what this album is, that's the one. And when I think about this album in years down the line, that's probably going to be the one song that I gravitate to and that I associate with it. So that was my pick.
So I'm going to make a note here, because this hasn't come up yet so far as I know, but it's definitely something I feel from knowing you for, 20 some odd years. You seem to have a certain affinity for songs about driving, for songs about road trips, or songs about...
Wait, what?
Songs about long drives.
You are teaching me something about myself, Harrison. What?
Like, I can't even really think about it, but, like, as soon as you said title and registration, in my head, I was like, wait, what? Actually, no, that makes it kind of sense. And I'm just
need
gonna
you to cite your sources. What are other road trip songs I like?
I'm gonna need to, like, just make this note here and point it out in the future.
Okay.
If it ever comes up, because, like, this is a thing I feel deep in me, despite not being able to corroborate it.
Okay, then. So, you know what time it is now.
Not time for the Play Disc Request Lottery?
Why is it not time for the Play Disc Request Lottery?
Because we had a request this episode?
Oh, we didn't skip the lottery last time we had a request because it was a request. We skipped it because we had a cross-promotion.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
Yeah, we're rolling the dice.
It's the Play Disc Request Lottery.
Now, I got some dice here. Got some other dice here. All right, so I've got the 2 dice in my hands. Here's how this works, people. We've got a publicly facing Google Sheets document that has albums numbered from 1 to 99. These have all been requested by our friends and our Patreon supporters and our interview guests. And I'm going to roll dice, and if somebody's number comes up, that's going to be our next episode. You can make a request if you choose by donating to us on Patreon at any level, patreon.com/playdiscpodcast. There's some good stuff on here. There's also a bunch of blank spots, so, you know. Here I go rolling. The number is 75.
Oh, I just barely missed it.
Oh, man. Yep, that's a blank spot. So, Harrison, I'm sure you're just bursting with excitement. I'm sure you're about to lose your marbles. But I advise you to pick it up, and tell me what we are listening to for our next episode.
For our next episode, all of Harrison's ska obsessing finally comes to a head. We are going to be doing our first ska album, and it's going to be Suburban Legends' 2012 album, Day Job, which definitely falls more on the pick-it-up side of things than the hardcore side of things.
That's right, and we're so excited. Now, I'm not a ska fan. Just for the record, I'm totally on board for this. But, yeah, we somehow have avoided this long actually discussing a full ska album. So it's going to be... I am fully prepared for the task of keeping Harrison's excitement contained for long enough to have a coherent thought about this album. We will see you in 2 weeks for that discussion. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. I'd also like to thank our good friend Ben Wright-Human for providing promotional art for us. You can find more of his work at bwhcomics.com if you'd like. Ben also supports us on Patreon, along with Vita Porabil, Chase DeMonte, and Adam Herchak. We're extremely grateful for all their support. Dear listeners, if you'd like to join them in supporting us, you can visit patreon.com/playdiscpodcast. A donation at any level will get you an entry into our request lottery. You'll be able to chant "Play Disc" in our opening theme song, and a still quite small library of bonus episodes of Harrison and I talking about movies about music. We'll also shout you out at the end of every episode. You can email us anytime you like at playdiscpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook under the name Play Disc Podcast. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at Play Disc Podcast. Disc is spelled with a C in all instances. Other things you can do if you want to be part of the conversation or if you want to help us out. If you don't have any money to donate, you can still go to Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on and give us a rating or a review. Both of those help immensely. If you liked us, give us a 5-star rating. If you didn't like us, give us a 5-star rating. If you've never heard of us, what are you doing at the end of an episode but give us a 5-star rating? Anything to add to that, Harrison?
If you like John but don't like me, give us a 5-star rating. If you like me but don't like John, give us a 5-star rating. If you don't like either of us, you have some incredible fortitude. So give us a 5-star rating.
Yes! Give yourself a 5-star rating for bearing with it for that long. We're going to see you all hopefully in 2 weeks for a discussion of suburban legends and ska. But until then, catch
Pick
you
you
on
up
the
on the
B-side.
B-side.
Oh.
And now, a quick word on copyright. Today's episode used excerpts from several songs by Death Cab for Cutie, namely The Sound of Settling and a Lack of Color, written by Ben Gibbard, Title and Registration in Expo 86, written by Gibbard and Chris Walla, Tiny Vessels, written by Gibbard and Nick Harmer, and The New Year and We Looked Like Giants, written by Gibbard, Walla, Harmer, and Jason McGarr. The rights to the recordings of these songs are owned by Barsook Records. We also used a short clip from Anna Eng, written and performed by They Might Be Giants, with rights to the recording owned by Warner Music Group. We've used these short clips for purposes of commentary without formal licensing, as allowed under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, also known as fair use.
The Playdisc theme song was written and recorded by me under my stage name Jon Eric, and all other aspects of the Playdisc podcast are jointly owned by myself and Harrison Porabil, and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Sharealike 4.0 International License.
Play disc!